Hi, thanks for joining us. We're going to be learning how to make a surgical mask with an insert, and it's got a little pipe cleaner to go across the bridge of their nose to hold it on a little tighter. So this might be a little bit different than what you've seen before, but we're sure glad you're with us. And we're going to start by showing you what materials you're going to need. So first of all, you're going to need to cut a main fabric. You just need one of those. They're 9.5 by 7.5 inches. The next one you're going to need is lining, and you'll need two of the same fabric cut 7.25 by 5.25. Then you're also going to need a pipe cleaner, and you're simply going to cut it in half. Once it's cut in half, you're just going to very easily tuck that. You can use pliers or just simply your fingers. And that's just to keep those sharp edges that sometimes go with pipe cleaners to a minimum. On the elastic, you can pick between cording elastic, the very thin, 1/8 of an inch elastic, or 1/4 inch elastic. They all work. And what you're going to want to do is cut 7 inches of two of the same. So whatever you pick, just make sure you do the whole thing in that. And that's all you're going to need for your materials. Okay, so our first step is that we're going to take our two pieces of our lining fabric, and we are going to put a iron crease on the long side, so the 7.25 side. We're just going to take that. We're going to make a 3/8 inch seam here. And the way that you can do that is you can simply measure that out with a tape measure. You can use a ruler, or I've made myself a little cheat sheet to make it easy, but any of those work. So when you're done, you'll have one that looks like this, and I've already had the chance to do the other one. So this will finish us for step one. That's what you should look like. Okay, so our second step is that we're just going to sew this down. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you can do almost 3/8. Your just goal is to get this attached. So I put mine very close together. You don't have to do that. It's called a chain stitch. You're more than welcome to do that. When you notice I cut them apart, there is room in between them to trim. That just kind of keeps it going if you're kind of mass production of these, but it's really fine. If not, you could have set one aside and then went ahead to the next one. Okay, so now we're ready for our third step. We're just going to lay our main fabric down flat, and we are going to line our two lining pieces up. The important thing here is to put the raw edge to the raw edge and put our sewed seam to the middle. Those are going to overlap. And then if you would like to measure, there'll be an inch on either side. So you need to go right in the middle, and that'll come out right at an inch. The next important part is when you pin these down, you're going to want to do that on the long edge. So on your 7.25 side of the lining is where you'll do that. And you're just going to, if you like to sew over your pins, you'll want to put them facing out. And if not, you can take them as you go. But that's your third step. Okay, now this is the fourth step. We're back to the sewing machine. You're just going to back stitch again, and you're just going to be attaching the lining to the main. So you're going to go a 1/4 inch seam all the way down here, and then we're going to come over to this other side and do the exact same thing. Okay, so for step 5, now that we've got this attached, we're simply going to open our lining up. And when I say iron the seams forward, that just means that this underneath is still facing the same way. So okay, so for step 6, we're simply going to flip this over. We're going to fold our lining in, and you're going to get right at that seam. So it's a 1/4 of an inch seam because that's what we just sewed. But you're going to do that, and you're going to simply iron this down. The important part of this step is that you're not just doing the lining, but you are also now ironing that little 1/4 of an inch seam down of the actual mask. simply going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So no sewing, just simply the ironing. So for step 7, we're simply going to top stitch this from the end of the mask all the way to the other end of the mask on each side. And top stitch just means you're just putting a seam in there to hold that down. It doesn't matter if your insert here, your lining goes this direction or this direction. That does not matter one bit. So we'll just go ahead and do that. It is important to catch the mask part and not just the lining on this. And always back stitching. So for step 8, what we're doing is we're going to create a casing for our pipe cleaner. So we're going to measure 3/8 of an inch off that top stitch that we just put in. I've tried to highlight it here so you can see it. You can do this a couple different ways. You can measure 3/8 of an inch and you can draw yourself a line that you're going to follow with a erasable marker, fabric marker. Remember, if you're going to draw your line, use a pen that's made for disappearing ink or the water soluble where it marks it away. Do not use a true fabric marker that's meant to stain the clothing because we wouldn't want that. Or you can simply use your sewing machine guide and put yours on 3/8 of an inch. The important part here is that you're creating the top. This is going to be the bridge of their nose. This is important if you have directional fabric. That means you have a specific up and down, right? You would not want their bridge to be here and then they would be walking around like that. So again, on most fabrics that we're using, there won't be directions. For instance, in mine, it doesn't matter which way I turned it. Once I do this, it creates the top, but that's the first time it will create the top. So once I've made my line for how I'm going to do it, I'm going to move right on over and I'm just going to sew from here to here. Okay, so we're still on step 8 and we've just moved over to the machine, back stitching of course, and then we're just going to sew directly on that line. So step 9 is very simply, you're just going to insert your pipe cleaner right into that casing, slide it all the way through. If it needs a little extra push, you can use your little pliers that you maybe used, or mine slid right in, so I think that's really all you have to do. Okay, so this is step 10, and by far the most difficult, but not too difficult. You will be able to handle it. We're going to start right here at the top, and I was just erasing my previous where I had written where the pipe cleaner went, so that's why it's a little wet there. So what we're going to do is you're going to make an accordion fold. If you like to eyeball it, that is 100% great in this instance. If you don't, we've got a little cheat sheet for you. So what you're going to do is, if you would like to, you can make a marking at 3/4 of an inch, then again at 2 1/4 inches, again at 3 3/4 inches, and then your last marking will be at 5 3/4 inches. And what you're going to do is you're just going to pinch these. The important parts of this are that when you pinch it, you have to get the back with you. You have to keep the top as the top, and if you start at the bottom and move up, great. Or if you start at the top and move down, great. But you can't switch in between. So this is what we mean by pinching it. I'm going to take this blue dot to my next blue dot up. I'm going to take that to the next dot up, its fold, and see how that green underneath doesn't want to come. You have to make it. And then your last one is up here. So some people find this is a good time to iron this down. Other people find the finger fold, the finger press, is good enough. So whatever you think. It does not have to be perfect, but what you're going for is this look. So again, you can do this by clothespinning it together. Or you can do this by pinning it. Whatever makes the most sense and whatever works for you is great. Our next step will be flipping it over, and we'll want to make sure that we catch this. But for this step, this is what you're going to want. Just approximately, so these are my margins and these are my folds. So you'll need 3 folds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is step 11. So we're going to flip it over and we're going to show you one right and one wrong side. So the right side is this, where you can see that the green caught all the way. The wrong side is this. Do you see how the green is coming out? So before we sew that, we would want to make sure that that goes all the way across and that we're catching it. And then when we go to sew, all we're doing is going straight down and catching all of that on both sides. What I think is important to do on this part is to start and go down. If you were to sew it, what I mean by that, if you sewed it this way and your creases were going up at this point, it might buckle a little bit. You can definitely do it. You just have to work it under your machine a little more. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're just going to start right over here. Put it on our machine, and we're just going to make sure that we catch every one of those folds. Okay, so this is what you're just finished. On step 12, you're just going to take your raw edge and fold it to your other raw edge and give it a good iron. And then you're going to, once you get that pressed, you're going to go just from there, just fold it right over again, and you're going to give it another nice press. I personally like to put a pin right here. You do not have to because you will have creased it enough. That's just my personal preference. And then we're going to just do the exact same thing on this side. And when we're on the machine, the things you're going to do is you're going to sew from here to here, right where they meet. So you're not going to close anything off. And you're not going to sew on this side, just where the two fabrics meet. And what you're going to want to make sure is if like that sticks out a little bit, you're going to want to tuck that under before you sew that on. We're going to do that on both sides right now. I'm going to back stitch because that's our casing, so that's very important. And we want to again be as close on the this outer edge as we can to the lining, but still catch all of it. Probably have to go a little bit slower on this. There's lots of bumps along the way. Okay, so step 13, we're just going to put a little safety pin in a piece of elastic that we've already cut 7 inches. And then you're just simply going to feed it through. If you've got children, this is a great way that they can help, even if they can't sew. They can surely do that for you. So that's step 13, and I've already done it on the other side. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Step 14, we're going to take our 2 ends, and they can meet either this way, or they can meet this way, whatever you prefer. I kind of like to do mine like this. What you do want to make sure is that they're not twisted, and you are going to go back and forth quite a few times because you do not want them to have twisted elastic. You're just going to trim that. And then once you do that, all you're going to do is pull that through at some point where that part's hidden. Okay, so now that we can't see that, I can either tack this at the bottom or at the top, but not both places because I want this to have some movement. So I'm going to do it down here just to make sure that stays nice and in place. And again, I'm going to go back and forth a few times. Perfect. We're going to do that on both sides, but one thing I do want to show you before I do it over here is that some people might say it would be smart to tack your elastic here and the other piece over here and not run it through here. That is not good on this particular project because we were practicing with them and it gives you too much room against their face. So it creates too much of an opening for germs to come in. So for this particular item that we're making, we're definitely going to want to come together and enclose the entire circle and not take a shortcut that would work on other projects. So on step 15, we just simply want you to trim your threads because you guys are actually going to have this product completely ready when you hand it over. So we want anything like this that you could do ahead of time to be done. So that's going to be 15. We just want you to see that when you go back here, this is how they will open it and put the filter inside of it. This part, the only part we have to do with that is donating the filters. For contamination reasons, when we hand them off, the nurses and medical professionals will do that part themselves. So when you finish like this, although it is fun to put one on and get your picture made and be proud of yourself, we want you to do that. But after you do the one, we would ask that you don't put them all on. We want to keep germs to a minimum, as you can imagine. So what you would do next is you just take your finished products. I happen to have 2 here. I'm going to put those inside my Ziploc baggie. A gallon works the best. Then I'm going to seal it. And on the outside, very neatly, I'm going to write ladies. And then my quantity is 2 in this baggie. So you can put multiple in a baggie. We are going to separate right here man's and woman's. So if you can keep those separate, that would be great. We were thinking if you have things for the guys that are kind of fun, that are a little more sporty or a little bit more boyish so that they don't have to wear these, that would be fabulous. And then as you can see on the directions, we're going to do 1 inch bigger on the male's sizes, and that distinction is made on the pattern. So when you open that, you'll be able to see that. And then the elastic is a little bit longer. So just make sure that if you are making the boys, you are looking for the different sizes, and then they would have a different baggie that said boy, male, men, whatever, that differentiates the girls from the boys, so that when we hand them off, they're going to go through a decontamination process. So if you can give them to us like this, that would be much appreciated.